Hello everyone, Adelina here for ellenhudson.com with two spring-themed cards using a color palette that I found from a few images on Pinterest. And the inks I'm using today are by Catherine Pooler. For both cards, I use the Be the Change stamp set by Brandy Kincaid from the Essentials by Ellen line. For my first card, I paired it with the Mondo OMG die, and I thought at first that I was going to put it on a peach base, and then after looking at it a little bit, I decided to change it up. I thought I wanted that peach base to be the frame around my images. I decided to just adhere the panel with the die cut directly onto the front of my card base instead of having a peach border. And I'm using this panel as the frame for my die cut letters. And so what I did is I cut 5 die cuts of each letter from 110-pound Nina Solar White cardstock because I wanted it to have a lot of depth. I used the die cut for the O to adhere that center piece so that it was perfectly placed, and then removed that top piece and slowly started to layer on each of the layers of 110-pound cardstock to give it some nice lift. You could do this with foam tape or those foam sheets, but I really like the density and the evenness that you get from using cardstock. I pulled out my "'Tis the Season" sentiments, also from the Essentials by Ellen line, and used the It's Spring sentiment stamped in VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. And that finished off my card, and I just love the height and depth that was created by layering the 110-pound cardstock. For my second card, I pulled out the Hard Candy Christmas stamp set by Brandy Kincaid from the Essentials by Ellen line, and decided to use the jar as the base of my design. And so what I wanted to do, what I was attempting to do, and I'm not sure that I pulled it off, but I still like the way the card turned out. I wanted those, I think they're moths, not butterflies. I wanted them to be flying out of this jar. And so I decided to stamp each of them in a different ink color, again, still using the Catherine Pooler inks, and die cut them and then layer them in the center die that comes with this set, because you can make this set into a shaker card, and cut out a few of the butterflies so that they're shaped as the same shape as that candy jar. Once I got those die cut, I pulled out my card base and proceeded to stamp the jar image onto the front of the card base in the VersaFine Clair Nocturne. And I had stamped a scrap jar, that's what that peach image is, just so that I could layer the butterflies and adhere them to each other prior to trying to adhere them to the front of the card base. And I think that worked out well so that I can kind of envision what that was going to look like. And so when I was stamping the jar to the front of the card base, I didn't want the lid on there because I wanted it to look like the butterflies or moths, whatever they are. I'll have to ask Brandy what they are. I wanted them to be flying out of the top of the lid, so I cleaned the lid portion off and it left me with just a faint line. So I just pulled out a felt tip marker and went over that top edge a little bit to create the top of the candy jar. And then pulled out those images that I had die cut and then carefully placed them in the center. And I really like how that looks. I think that this is a concept that could be used for a variety of images that you want kind of tucked into that glass jar. I think it has a lot of possibilities. So I added a little bit of glue, liquid glue to that, and then proceeded to just carefully place a few of the other images that I had die cut and stamped in that color palette. For the last few images that I added to the card base, I decided to pop them up with some foam squares, and I really like how that finished off those images by adding just a little bit of depth to the card front. Since I was left with one large image, I debated whether or not to add it. I really liked how the previous card looked when the front was filled with all the images, so it was a tough decision to make, but I decided to leave a little white space and save that last big image for another project. To finish off my card, I decided to pull out my Pretty Pink Posh Spring Blessing script die. This die is incredibly delicate, and I decided to do the same thing that I did with my first card and layer, this time I only layered 3 layers of the 110-pound cardstock, and I used the die cut as a template to layer all the letters because they were so delicate. I attempted to do 3 layers of the dot over the I, or what's the correct call? It's called the tittle. But man, that little piece is tiny, and I threw in the towel. I gave it up. I figured if it says spring, you'll figure it out. I didn't want to mess with it. I just got frustrated. Then I got lazy and decided to add color with it by just taking that Catherine Pooler ink pad and putting it directly on top of the die cut letters. And it actually worked really well. So I think I'll be using that strategy in the future for a quick way of coloring my letters. But I really love how delicate that sentiment is. I left off the blessings part because I just wanted it to say spring. And I think it looks great with this color palette. And then the last thing I did is I pulled out some sequins that I had called North Pole by Catherine Pooler, which has these really pretty little blue stars. And I decided to add those in there. They also have some really nice brightly colored green sequins that I added to this card front just to pull out a little bit of that bright green because I wanted just a little more of that added to this card front. And that was it for this one. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. You can find information about the blog post and the products that I use in the description below. Thanks for stopping by today and have a great day.